Salut.
Salut, ça va bien?
Ça va, merci. So let me know when you are ready to, with the recording, and I will start.
It's rolling, so all yours.
Okay, so could you confirm that you look at my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this kind invitation. Well, you know already who I am. I am a computer scientist, but I happen to work in a department of interpreting and translation. So I guess it would be something equivalent to somebody who came from RALI and ended up at OLST. So, yeah. As you say already in the introduction, I'm talking to you from Bologna. The university is the oldest in the Western world. So just for you to get to know where I'm talking for, I'm roughly in this area of Italy, north from San Marino. It's one of the most important universities in Italy, probably top 3. It's almost 1,000 years old, so it has many famous characters from Copernicus to Galvani to Umberto Eco. So it's a big and old institution. You already said who I am. Something you didn't mention was that in 2007, when I was doing my master's degree here in Mexico, actually, I happened to spend 6 months in Montreal with you guys. I was working under Patrick Drouet in OLST, and I happened to attend a lecture from Philippe Langlais on artificial intelligence. So it's very, very nice to be with you now after 13 years. The work I'm going to refer to today has to do with propaganda, which is a topic we have been working during the last probably 2 or 3 years. It's a joint work with many, many people and many institutions. Mainly Giovanni da San Martino, who used to be at QCRI, the same as myself, but he's now at the University of Padova. Preslav Nakov is still leading the project in QCRI together with Yifan Sang. And there have been other people like Seung-Hak Yu, which is now at MIT, or Isra Yaradat, who is now doing her PhD in Texas, in Arlington. So disclaimers, first of all, I'm not a politician. I'm not a journalist or anything similar. As I told you already, I'm just a computer scientist who happens to be working on models to handle both propaganda and disinformation. But because I'm talking about this topic, there's some politics and some journalism in this talk. Some of the examples that I'm going to show to you have been post-edited from translations, automatic translations with DeepL. You can blame Patrick about this, because when he first proposed this talk to me, it was because he heard a Spanish version of it. So I had examples in Spanish, and when I told him, okay, give me some time to find some examples, probably from Quebec or from Montreal, he told me, no way. Use your examples in Spanish, and in that way you don't enter into into local politics, and you won't have any problems with the audience. So I just translated some examples from Spanish. I think he's right. His lecture of the situation was right. And obviously I'm biased like everybody. So if you don't agree with some of my examples, maybe you are biased to the other side, or you are more central. And the last thing that I didn't write here, but another disclaimer, is that this is not a particularly technical talk, because I don't want to tell you, well, we use BERT and we wired this and we added a new layer to the network, blah, blah, blah. I want to give you a rough introduction to everything we have been doing, why, from our point of view, it is so interesting. And if you're interested in digging forward a little bit, you can go to our papers, you can ping me, and I'll be very happy to give you more technical details. So I'm going to start with a motivation. Later on, I'm going to explain you what is propaganda exactly, and I'm going to talk about the main 2 initiatives that we have been working on. One is giving a news article, identifying if it is propagandist or not, and the other one is giving a text, identifying specific propaganda techniques. And time allowing, please stop me when I have probably 5 or 2 or 10 more minutes. If I have time, I'm going to give some final thoughts. So, motivation of propaganda. I'm going to show you an example. This was an image which was posted on social media in September of this year. So there was a feminist pro-abortion demonstration in Mexico City. And on social media, namely Facebook, Twitter, people started to post this image. You don't need to read right now, don't worry, but roughly it's a policewoman who has been attacked apparently by these pro-abortion feminist women. When I first looked at this picture, I thought, I've seen this face, and actually I ended up in this lady on the right-hand side who happens to be a character called Altagracia Guerrero, who is a character from a TV series called Vis a Vis, a Spanish TV series, and she happens to be a policewoman in this TV series. So my first thought was somebody took the face of this lady, put the mask and the helmet on it, and then claimed that this was a policewoman and made up a story. Later on, when I was digging a bit more about it, I went to DuckDuckGo and tried to find if there was a picture, or if I was able to find the source of this picture. So I just queried crying policewoman. And I found a tweet from another lady called Kenna Ribe who said, oh, I am the author of this picture. I actually went and took this picture in the demonstration. And what you're saying that this policewoman was attacked by the demonstrators is absolutely false. Now, I didn't tell you yet who actually posted this image or who started to distribute this image to the world, to the social networks. Well, one of them was a Twitter account called Guru Politico, which happens to be a verified Twitter account. And the response to this complaint from Ken Uribe was, well, we didn't know this is your picture, so don't worry, we are going to unload it. So we're going to delete it from our social media. The problem, which was actually stated by another lady, another verified account on Twitter, was that, well, before you post something, you should verify if what is said is true, or if the image is true, or somebody's trying to trick you and to spread some hidden message. So I wasn't sure how to proceed here, so I started to dig further, and I went to find, or try to find, who Ken Uribe was. So I went again to DuckDuckGo and searched for Ken Uribe. She happens to be a journalist. And here on the right, you can see the official picture without violence on top, without any image pasted on the left, without any text at the bottom. So it's kind of clear that, yeah, this is the original picture. And here in the center, you have another picture of this same police lady, maybe some other day, which makes it evident, yeah, well, they know each other. So it's very likely what Ken Uribe was saying, that she is the one behind the original picture, is actually true. Then I went to look for who is Guru Politico, who is the one who started to spread this image saying violence against this policewoman. As I told you before, this is a verified Twitter account, and they are supposed to be journalists. So indeed, as I told you, even a journalist in nowadays, let's say, news landscape, they don't verify before posting contents. If you're very interested in semi-automatic verification, by the way, we have a shared task that we have been organized during the last 3 years, and we are organizing a new edition this year. It's called Check That. It's organized in the framework of CLEF. And it's precisely, we have shaped 4 tasks that are kind of in the middle between information retrieval and natural language processing. And it's about giving a tweet, for instance, telling if it is check-worthy. If the answer is yes, then we have a task about verifying if we already have a claim, which is similar semantically, maybe a paraphrases of the claim, and then we can give an answer whether this claim is true or not. There's another task, which is purely information retrieval, which is given the claim, shaping it as a query, and then retrieving evidence from the web. And finally, the last task, which is a pure machine learning task, is given the claim and the supporting evidence, trying to find out if the claim is true or false. But this is another topic, and I'm not going to talk anymore about this. Back to the post. So again, you don't need to read anything yet, so don't worry, this is still in Spanish, and I'm sure most of you don't understand what is said here. But my idea now was I want to dissect who exactly is behind this particular post. So here on the left, you can see there is a logo from something called Fuerza Unida. So I went online and I tried to find who this United Force, who are they? And the only thing I found was on iTunes, there is some band called Fuerza Unida who happen to have one single. So my assumption is that somebody liked this image and they say, oh, this looks nice. So maybe if we put this image there, it's going to feel more like authentic. So I think somebody just borrowed the image from somewhere else. The second logo in the image, if you look at it carefully here on the right, it says NR Communications. So I went to look for what is NR Communications. They happen to be another medium. They are a newspaper, which happens to publish red notes and yellow notes. Broadsheet, I think, is the name in English. So as a computer scientist, I would like to know, for instance, to try to do some image processing. I try to find out if the logo on the left was added first, if otherwise it was the logo on the right, if the banner at the bottom was added before or later. I mean, which was the process of generation of this image. But unfortunately, I'm not an expert in image processing, so I couldn't do that. Instead, I know how to deal with text because my background is in natural language processing. So let's now focus on the text. This is the message that appears at the bottom in this banner of the image, and I'm just going to read it out loud for you. So it says violence. Well, violence is actually on top. And at the bottom it says, this is the image of a warrior, of a woman who breaks her mother to go ahead, not a mediocre woman who hides her face to commit a crime by covering herself behind a demonstration. And I think you need some localization here. In Spanish, and in particular in Mexican Spanish, when you call a woman a warrior, which is in Spanish guerrera, you are saying she's a fighter and she's really fighting for herself and her family. When a person in Mexican Spanish breaks her mother, you don't actually break your mother, but it means you pay a lot of effort on doing something. So this message is basically saying, this is a good lady who is a fighter, who works for the wellness of herself and her family. Instead, the people or the ladies who participated in the demonstration are completely the opposite. When we dissect this kind of message, we can realize that there are a particular propaganda techniques. For instance, one of them is called loaded language. And it involves using either words or phrases which have a very strong emotional implication. So violence on top with these exclamation marks, breaks her mother, which, as I explained you in Spanish, it's a very strong phrase. They are trying to convey to the audience some emotion. There's also name calling here, which is another propaganda techniques, which means labeling with something that the audience fears, hates, finds undesirable, or on the other side, loves or praises. So for instance, saying this woman is a warrior, I'm praising this woman as a great woman. On the other hand, when I refer to the pro-abortion demonstrators, I'm saying they're mediocre women. So it's something that a person should hate. And finally, another propaganda technique which appears in this very short paragraph is doubt, which is questioning the credibility of someone or something. In this case, by writing demonstration with quotation marks, I'm claiming this demonstration by the women, by the pro-abortion women, was not so. It was something else. So with the careful use of this kind of language, the person behind of this post is trying to convey a message of don't be with the pro-abortion women. Instead, you should be with the police. So now that I show this example to you, I haven't defined yet propaganda. So what is exactly propaganda? It's a term coined in the 17th century in the Vatican, here very close to where I am now. And the idea was propagating the faith both in the North, because Protestantism was starting and they wanted to propagate the Catholic faith, and in the New World, in Latin America mostly, what is currently Latin America. The problem is that because of this fight between Protestants and Catholics, very soon propaganda acquired a very negative connotation, which is actually the connotation that we have about it nowadays. So speaking about the definition, propaganda is information used primarily to influence an audience and further an agenda. It may not be objective, but it could be objective. It may be presenting facts, but in general, these facts are presented selectively to encourage one particular synthesis of perception. Why is this interesting? Because people are very worried nowadays about disinformation and fake news. You don't need to make up something. You don't need to lie to convey a message and to influence people. You can use the truth. And if you use wisely propaganda techniques, people don't realize, which is the best possible propaganda, you do manage to achieve your objective. So obviously, this message or this post that I showed you in my example is propaganda. Not only the full paragraph and the full image and the composition of the ideas is propaganda, but many of the specific words. There are many examples of propaganda. The famous ones are, for instance, the Nazi propaganda or the Soviet propaganda. But people in general don't realize that not only propaganda is very active nowadays, it's even worse than in the past, because before it was the governments or it was political parties who had a propagandist agenda, and they spent money to convey their message to the citizens or to anybody in the world. Nowadays, you don't need to pay money. You need to convince a person, a social media user. You need to find a person aligned to your ideas, and you just start feeding contents to them. And they, for free, will start to convey the message to their followers and to their friends. So the way propaganda can reach many different people from many different backgrounds is completely different nowadays. And it's an explosion of propaganda nowadays, both in social media and even in standard newspapers. So this is why we started trying to create a supervised model to identify propagandist news. Now you might be wondering, why are you guys focusing on news, on formal news outlets? Why don't you go just to Facebook or to Twitter or to TikTok? Well, because mainstream outlets do apply propaganda. So for instance, if you look at this news article on the left, this is a Mexican newspaper, and you can read that it says here at the bottom, in 24 hours, Brazil records more than 1,000 deaths from COVID-19. There's no propaganda at all in the text or in the header of this news. But look at this picture that they used to illustrate this news. So it's Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, laughing about something. So it looks like this evil character is not doing anything against COVID. So without telling anything to you, they select a very interesting picture to put it together with the news and get you an idea that, yeah, these are the facts. Brazil is doing pretty bad with COVID. This guy is probably the guilty person. Is it true? Maybe yes, maybe no. This is not under discussion right now, but the newspaper is trying to convey that message. But again, I'm not working on images. So for instance, the work we have been doing so far is not able to deal with this kind of propaganda. Other interesting factors is, like, for instance, in this news article on the right from May in 2011, it says, a Mexican makes history in Spain with a plagiarism detector. This happens to also be fake news. And I know it very well because the Mexican they refer to is myself. and I didn't make any history. It was just a paper which was presenting a plagiarism detector. We never even deployed it. But they use, or formal newspapers or mainstream outlets use language that tries to exaggerate things very often, like saying that a person makes history. Again, it could be true, it could be false. In this case, I can tell you it's completely false. But anyway, for the reader, in their mind, the idea is that this person, this guy, whoever he is doing pretty good in Spain, which is the message they want to convey, success of a person abroad. So with these two examples, I just want to convince you, yeah, identifying propaganda in standard or in mainstream news outlets matters. If you are not fully convinced yet, I want to show you some headers from the Mexican presidential elections 2 years ago. So there were 4 main candidates, and there was this newspaper, El Universal, the Universal, I guess, who over a week, they posted the profiles of the different candidates. And these are the headers of them all. So for instance, the first one, he's a right side candidate. The description is the aspirant who dreamed to become an astronaut. This lady also from the right, the candidate who could become a nun. So very positive probably from a right side voter, negative from a left one. Third candidate, this one is from the center, and the header is Weaver of Agreements with a Yale seal. So Yale is a very important university, so this is a very good candidate. And the fourth candidate from the left, foolish and stubborn. This is how this AMLO is, according to his collaborators. So once again, you can see the use of propaganda in this case, whereas there are completely off-topic things and probably relevant aspect, like somebody who, when he was a kid, he wanted to be an astronaut, but this could be considered as positive because then he had dreams, and very high dreams apparently. So this is a very forward-looking person. A person who is able to build agreements with a very good education versus a person who is foolish and stubborn. So I guess I don't need to tell you that this newspaper was definitely not supporting these 4 candidates, which at the end happened to win. So basically, what did we do in this case? So this is Project PRPPY, and the idea was developing tools to help readers to notice propaganda, because as I told you at the beginning, the most successful propaganda is the one which is not evident to the reader, which is the one who is hidden. And the other objective we had was analyzing propaganda in media. Why? As I'm telling you here, because in my opinion, this is the best way to find misinformation. If you, I hope you are not, but if you happen to be a supporter of Trump, and I tell you, oh, look, Trump lied on this and he lied on that, it's very difficult that you are going to believe me. Because you are a supporter, and supporters either of Trump or Biden or any other politician tend to be blind about negative aspects of the people they support. Even it is also happening in sports. If you are a supporter of the Alouettes of Montreal, for instance, and I tell you something against them, then you are not going to be very happy and you might not believe me. If instead I tell you, look, this news article, I'm not telling you if it is true or if it is false, or if it should be, if you will be, if you should be happy with the article being aligned to your mindset or not. If I just tell you, look, I think this article is propagandist, so be aware that they are trying to sell you something. They are trying to convey some idea to you that might not be extremely objective. From my point of view, this is even more important. And this idea of, no, I don't believe you, or this is fake news, is kind of taken aside. So this project PRPPY was super simple. It was just a binary classifier. Given a news article, tell me, is this propaganda or this is not propaganda? If you're interested in this problem, we have a paper. It's paywalled, so if you are interested, just ping me and I'm going to be very happy to share it with you. So it's just a supervised model. It's a regressor that happens to compute a propagandist index. So between 0 and 100, I tell you this is 80% propaganda or it is 20% propaganda. In order to build it, we created a corpus of about 55,000 articles with this binary notation from about 100 sources, all in English. And we include a bunch of experiments in this article about how the source of a news affects in a prediction, if the models actually predict propaganda or they are instead learning the style of a news article, or if they are learning the topic, because probably news articles about politicians tend to be more propagandist than articles about, I don't know, economy, for instance. The model is fairly good. It happens to reach an F measure of about 82, 83. And as I said, if you're interested, you can go and have a look. As I told you, it does contain experiments about the stability of the results, considering a different amount of sources to learn from. And we do an analysis of the evolution of, given a number of sources, how the results behave with respect to the prediction of actually being propagandist or not. Besides technicalities, as I told you, if you're interested, please get in touch and I will be very happy to set up a conversation with you. Something that we did with this prototype was integrating it into a news aggregator, which is called TAMBIG. And the nice thing about this news aggregator is that the idea is trying to make profiles of both of news outlets and of specific news articles. So in this snapshot from June last year, I'm showing you that when a news article comes to the news aggregator, it passes through the propaganda binary classifier. And if we think it is propagandist, actually we put a flag here and say, look, we think there is propaganda here. On the right-hand side, I'm showing you some plots that we show some aggregated statistics, which show you the amount of propaganda that different news outlets tend to publish. So for instance, here on top, you can see Fox News against CNN. So this is over a bunch of news articles, let's say a few thousand articles, which percentage of them is considered not propagandist at all versus slightly propagandist all the way to very propagandist. So the absolute numbers really don't matter here, but you can see, for instance, that according to this analysis, Fox News tends to publish way more fully propagandist articles than CNN, for instance, regardless of the topic, by the way. In this case, we are not talking about a comparable analysis in which we take equivalent news articles, referring to the same news, and compare how propagandist one is against each other. This is just pure statistics on all the news without any alignment. If you feel curious about TAMBIG, you can go, and actually I can go right now and give you a quick look. I hope it's gonna work. So this is TAMBIG. It's a bit messy because we include both Arabic and English in the same interface. So here you can see there are articles in Arabic, articles in English. There should be somewhere. No, right now everything is in Arabic. But as I told you, from my point of view, the interesting part is that if you go here to the right, you can look at the profiles, which is similar to what I just showed you. And not only it has the propaganda index or the propagandist percentage in terms of the articles, it also has a bunch of other supervised models to compute, for instance, how central a particular medium is. So according to TAMBIG and according to this model, for instance, Fox News is not very central. It's about 30% central, and its level of hyperpartisanship, it's only of 1%. Here it's the plot I just showed you in the screenshot, but this is just live. This is computed yesterday, I guess. So as you can see, about 5% of the articles published by Fox News happen to be very propagandist, and about the same percentage are likely to be propagandist, whereas 75% are not propagandist, according to the PRPPY model. We also have classifiers for the kind of topics they tend to cover. So for instance, Fox is more political. If you look at the BBC, they tend to publish more about cultural identity, for instance. We also have statistics about factuality in the reporting, from high to mixed to low. The political ideology, Fox is mostly right, etc. There are many other also stances about particular topics like racism or immigration or gun control, which happens to, or it tends to be more aligned to far right. So please, if you have some time, go to Tambig, and hopefully you're going to find it interesting. Back to the slides. Yes. So this is about PRPPY, and this is about identifying full articles as either propagandist or not, or computing the propaganda index. Now I'm going to talk to you about the second sub-project, which is kind of the more recent one and the one which is more active. And this is about identifying propaganda, specific propaganda techniques. So the name of this project is PRTA. And why do we need to go beyond this document level? I mean, identifying whether an article is propaganda or not, or a tweet is propaganda or not. Well, there are three main reasons. One is telling you, reader, that this news article or this tweet is propagandist is not enough. I need to highlight you the specific fragment that is being propagandist and the specific fragment which is trying to trick you or to convey this message to you or convince you of something. So this is the first reason. The second reason is that if we say in Tambig or in PRPPY in general, if we claim that an article is propaganda, we need to be able, or we want to be able to explain why exactly this article is considered propaganda. Why is this important other than explaining what the model is doing? Is because we need to justify if some medium, for instance, Fox News or CNN or the BBC, happens to land in Tambig and they see that there is an article which has been flagged as propaganda, we better are able to justify why this article is being flagged as such, because otherwise we could face some issues with this newspaper. What are these propaganda techniques? I showed you already some of them, and I'm going to show a few other examples. So this one is in Italian, but I'm pretty sure you French speakers are going to understand it. So this article says, USA, Russia, and China, the new world war is going to be for data. In this case, they are using a propaganda technique called exaggeration, which is representing something in an excessive manner. Yes, sure, there is a very clear fight among these three countries about who is going to be the leader in data analysis and in computing power and artificial intelligence. But telling that this is a new world war is probably a bit too much. As I told you before, propaganda doesn't need to make up information. It doesn't need to lie. So for instance, Greta Thunberg last year in the United Nations General Assembly, in her speech says something like, we are in the beginning of a mass extinction and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. Maybe you are aligned with Greta Thunberg. You might believe what she says is true, but we should still consider that she's using propaganda when he tries to convey her message. So in this particular case, she's using a technique called a peer-to-fear, which is seeking to build support for an idea, in this case that we need to get active in climate change prevention or solutions, by instilling anxiety or panic in the population. So as I told you before, if you are aligned with Greta Thunberg or with any politician, the idea of this kind of models, of supervised models, is make it evident that sure, maybe this is true. I'm not telling this is a lie. I'm just telling you this person who produced this piece of information is using this propaganda technique. He's trying to appeal to your fear to convince you of what she's saying. And there are many others, like for instance, this was another post who was produced after that demonstration, this pro-abortion demonstration I mentioned to you before. So it says on top, she could have fled the fire, but mom is mom. So this is a thought terminating cliche. So if you are a mother, you better not don't abort, because a mother is a mother. So look at this. This is a bird who is not, she's not a human, but the most important to her are her kids. So thought terminating cliche are phrases that discourage critical thought, meaningful discussion. They are typically very short and generic. So who cares if a pregnancy is the result of a violation, or the person is living in the most difficult situation and she doesn't have any other option? According to this propaganda, or according to this post, you don't have a choice. You need to have the baby. Again, I'm not saying I'm in favor or against. I'm just showing you the examples. At the bottom, it says, while an ideology financed by millions of dollars convinces you that abortion is a right and that your freedom is worth more than the life of your own child, nature continues to demonstrate the value of life. So once again, this is appeal to prejudice. So seeking to build support for an idea based on preconceived judgments. That, for instance, in this case, freedom is not more important than a child. There is also minimization here. There is causal oversimplification, because as I told you, there are many factors that bring a woman to decide to abort. Maybe her own life is in danger. But in this case, there is a causal oversimplification, which happens to say, well, it doesn't matter. You should give birth to a son and you shouldn't abort. So I'm showing you kind of the extreme, like a person who is pro-climate and who is trying to push people to do something against climate change, versus some other people who are against abortion, and how they both seem to be kind of confronting point of view, or have confronting points of view, but they both use propaganda techniques to convey their message. So what would we do in PRTA? We identified 18 propaganda techniques from in the Wikipedia article of propaganda techniques. For instance, there are like 70 something. So we went and studied all of them, not only from the Wikipedia, but from scholars working on propaganda. And we identified 18, which we thought was very likely that they would be used specifically in news articles. And the second criteria we used to filter these 18 propaganda techniques was that these 18 propaganda techniques should be a person with an educated eye, which means probably a journalist, should be able to identify them in an article without going to external information sources. So we wanted to, or our focus right now is on intrinsic analysis of propaganda. So given a document and no other information, no other external information, I want to identify the propaganda techniques. There are many others which do need to have a look at the outside, like for instance, oversimplification. To understand that I'm simplifying something, I need to know if in other media or in other sources, they do cover many reasons behind a fact. So in that case, I might have to do an external analysis, but we didn't want to do that at that stage. If you're interested in this particular topic, we have this EMLP paper from 2019 that I invite you to have a look at. I'm not going into very technical details, but I can give you a rough overview. So basically, we created an instance of Anaphora, which is a platform for linguistic annotation. We hired a bit more than 6 professional annotators to do the job. And we gave them articles, news articles from both objective news media and not so objective news media. So we made a mix. Every article was annotated by 2 people. And after these 2 people annotated the same article, there was a consolidation stage, because in the pilot experiments, we realized that the task was very difficult. So that's why, for instance, we didn't go for crowdsourcing, like in Mechanical Turk or alike. We realized that the inter-annotator agreement was very low. So we opted for a two-stages annotation. First, the two annotators do it independently, and later on, when it was possible to meet, they would meet and discuss all instances that they didn't agree upon up to reaching consolidation. About the workload, according to them, they were spending 100% of their working week on this, and they were managing to annotate about 50 articles a week. So it's a fairly difficult task. This is a rough idea of the corpus. So overall, at the time, we had 536 articles annotated. It could feel like it's a bit small, but if you look at the right, in total we have roughly 9,000 propaganda snippets. So the instances are not these 536. We have 9,000 instances of propaganda. Think of it as named entity recognition, for instance. Corpora for named entity recognition tend to have this amount of instances roughly. So it's not so small. The distribution of techniques, for instance, you can see here that loaded language, which is the first bar here on top, is the most frequent one. About 30% of the cases of propaganda in the corpus and in general in news media seems to be loaded language, followed by name calling, repetition, exaggeration, etc. So here you can see all. I told you we had 18 techniques. We ended up merging some of them, and we ended up with 14 techniques only. All of these details are in the paper.
Alberto.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, so maybe you could wrap up.
Okay, so I'm not going to go to the final talks. I'm just going to, thank you. I'm just going to tell you, if you look at the paper, you are going to see that we tried many different flavors of BERT, adding many different things. And the model was pretty bad. So we roughly got a 22% F measure. So we asked for help to the community. This was translated into a SemEval task. So we created two independent tasks. One was pan identification, given a text, tell me which fragments are propagandists without caring about the class. And the task 2 was technique classification. Given the snippet, which we know already is propagandist, and the context, tell me which specific class or which specific propaganda technique has been applied. If you're interested in listening to what happened here, we happen to be in the middle of calling right now, and even if nobody's in Barcelona, where it was supposed to be held, but the SemEval sessions are going to be this Saturday. So if you happen to be at calling, or if you're planning to join calling after this talk in the coming days, on Saturday, we're going to have the talk about everything around this short task. And we're going to have a poster session with all the new findings from the participants. All of them use BERT and transformers and many fun, fancy things around transformers, but still the quality is not so good. So for span identification, they got only 51 F measure. And for technique classification, they get a quality of about 62, again, F measure, using different mix of transformers, of learning models, neural networks, SVMs, etc. All the details are in the paper. So I'm going to skip this. When you say wrap up, you mean, should I close now, or I have like 3 minutes?
3 minutes, yeah, okay.
Okay, so just to close, so the data is available. You can go to Zenodo and download it. The SemEval short task is over. As I told you, it's going to be presented on Saturday, all the results, including those from the participants. But because we realized that it became a very popular task, and we think it's interesting and it's important to keep working on this, we decided to convert it into a live task. So we didn't release the test set, the annotation of the test set. We kept it hidden, and we now have a live leaderboard. So if you're interested, you can register at any moment, download training and development sets, and you can just submit your runs whenever it is convenient for you. And you can compete with other people and try to create better models. As I told you before, I had a very last section with final thoughts, but I was fairly sure I wouldn't be able to make it to it, so I'm going to close it here. So now, but I'm going to be very happy to answer questions if you have some.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. So we're going to take questions in English, I suppose.
Yes, please. I'm sorry, but I lost my French when I started to learn Italian. And I mean it. I really lost it because of that.
Yes, Jordi.
Yes. Are you not afraid that your technology could also be used for propaganda by saying that the other political party is doing propaganda?
Yes. Well, I'm not afraid. And let me tell you why. And this is related to other tasks I've been working in the past. So when I was working on plagiarism detection, people used to tell me, you are not afraid, because if a student knows that there is a plagiarism detector that you are going to use in their essays, they're going to change the text to avoid your model to identify plagiarism. Well, that's the idea, right? To make the student work. When I was following some work by colleagues on Wikipedia vandalism detection, they were also wondering, aren't you afraid, guys? Because if you have a vandalism detector on Wikipedia, people is going to be aware of that, and they're going to try to trick the system for this vandalism to go hidden. It's the same idea. I mean, if people are going to try to fight each other, at the end, the model is there in the middle, and the only objective is try to highlight this idea of propaganda. If one party is going to blame another party of propaganda, I'm pretty sure the other party will find something similar about the first one. So I don't think this is a deterrent to work on this. I hope I answered to your question.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Is there another question? Philippe?
Philippe.
Yes, thank you, Alberto, for this very nice talk. I didn't know you were working on that, actually. So I can imagine, actually, that based on your definition of propaganda, there might be propaganda everywhere. So if I take any article on AI today, and if I apply your criteria, including your papers, I believe, I'm pretty sure that every 3 sentences we will have spans of propaganda according to your definition.
I'm pretty sure, mostly in the abstract, when you make your claims and people say, yeah, we beat the state of the art and our model is great. Yeah, it's true. By the way, the idea is not kind of eliminating propaganda. I mean, we all use it. In my talk, I did use it many times when I told you this is very interesting and this is irrelevant, blah, blah, blah. The only point is making it evident. So the idea is, for instance, creating a plugin on Firefox or whatever browser that you can just turn on and off just to make it evident. And that's it. It's not like telling you, oh, Greta Thunberg is applying propaganda. Don't follow her. No, that's not the objective. It's just, if Greta Thunberg is applying this propaganda, I make you aware that she's doing it. If after that you still believe her message is important, great, go with it. This is not about blaming somebody or for just using propaganda. It's about just making it evident.
No, I understand your motivation, but if I'm right, it means that it's in the human nature to sort of use propaganda to disseminate ideas. I mean, even without a bad thing in mind, you know. So that's why I was mentioning that. But
yeah, but by the way, the use of a propaganda technique doesn't mean something is overall propaganda.
Right.
So one thing is the techniques and one thing is propaganda overall.
Right.
So they are very related, obviously, because to convey a message with propaganda, you need to use the techniques. But using a propaganda technique doesn't make your message propaganda.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that. Thank you for quoting that.
Thank you.
I think Genuine had a question.
Yes, Alberta, thank you very much for the talk. That's great talk. I have a maybe more technical question, not the detail about the techniques, but just wondering what are the signals that you can use in a computational model to detect whether this is propaganda. You mentioned a lot of different kinds of features that a human being can observe, but those signals are quite difficult to observe by computer. Exaggeration and so on. We have to use our own judgment to judge whether this is exaggerated or not. But how do you implement in your model to take into account these kind of signals, and what are the signals that you use or generally used in the competition?
So in the PRPP model, which is the one that operates at the document level, that it only tells you this is propaganda or not, our hypothesis was that there was some style which were attached to propaganda regardless of who was the writer. So we tried some manually engineered features, including, for instance, vocabularies, which had a very high sentimental load, for instance, the look vocabularies. But because we had this hypothesis about style, we went to look at the literature on style, and we found out that the most important representation for writing style is character trigrams. So we just decided to go for plain and simple TF-IDF bag of character trigrams. And it happened to be the most stable representation and the best performing one. So this is something that they use very often, for instance, for authorship attribution, which linguistically speaking, when I talk to my colleagues, translators here, and I tell, oh yeah, this is the kind of feature we use, they're like, but that doesn't make sense. That doesn't have any linguistic ground. Yeah, that's true, but it works. In the case of PRTA, which is the one that tries to identify specific fragments, what we decided to use was, it's a sequence labeling task. So you are given a text and you need to say, yeah, this word is propaganda, this word is propaganda, this one is not, this one is, this one is, this one is not. So again, without any linguistic background, what we decided to go is, we decided to go for the state of the art in similar sequence labeling tasks. So we went to look for named entity recognizers. And we found that BERT is or by the time was the state of the art. So we just applied it again without trying to find for any ground to build this representation. And actually, from the results from the participants, it seems that yeah, this is so far the best way to do it, because most of the top 5 teams in both subtasks applied just some transformer without any extra information, and it works fairly well. It's not perfect. We are very far from perfect. Like, models tend to be very, very good to identify loaded language, because again, there is probably a closed vocabulary or a specific vocabulary which is already reflected in BERT, and it helps to identify them. But there are some others which are still very, very difficult to find.
Okay, so the features come just from the document itself. You don't integrate other features such as the source of information and well, you mentioned that the source, the number of sources that support the fact is very important.
Yes, but again, because we at the time and even now we are more interested in, we're not interested in going and retrieving evidence. And actually the kind of techniques that we are focusing on do not require this evidence. We don't look at it anymore. Actually, I think that's one of the kind of future work avenues, like to try to focus on this kind of propaganda technique, which that to make it evident, you actually need to go and retrieve evidence. But it's somehow in between fact checking and argument retrieval. So it's a bit trickier than this intrinsic analysis.
Okay, we'll take one last question. Isma had her hand in the air for a long time, so it's your turn. Isma.
Yeah, thank you. Great talk. Thank you very much, Alberto.
you.
I really enjoyed your talk, actually. I work on manipulation and persuasion as well, but it looks like you are using almost the same techniques. So what kind of, I mean, which difference are you seeing between propaganda and manipulation and persuasion?
There are no big difference. I haven't studied manipulation in depth, but the only thing I can tell you is I'm pretty sure the intersection is very large.
Yeah, because actually, if I well understand, propaganda is used to spread idea, opinion, ideology, go figure, right? And they try to change the behavior of targeted public, right?
Yes.
But in manipulation and let's say, or online deception or persuasion, sometimes it's the case and sometimes not, because we just want to make people buy something, but it's not that far to change their mind about like a political opinion, you know? So maybe that's the difference, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe yes, at the end it's probably the purpose, not the way to do it. If I still have time to share my screen, and if this thing works, so when we annotated the corpus, we used, oh, I'm not sure if you can see this. So we created this diagram to try to help people to identify propagandist fragments or not. So for instance, of course, here it is evident we are computer scientists and we create a flow diagram, and the annotators didn't use it at the end, but anyhow, sometimes it's useful like now. So the kind of propaganda techniques we focus on are emotion and sentiment mechanisms and logical fallacies. And I'm pretty sure you look many of these as well in your from your side.
Yeah, because we're working on like a critical thinking models, and they use pretty much those techniques as well. Yeah.
Yeah, at the end, I think it's roughly the same. So if you are working on it, I'm pretty sure it is. This should be relevant for you.
So we should keep in touch.
Yeah, yes, please do.
I did send you an invitation on LinkedIn yesterday.
Oh, it was you. Okay,
Yes, that were me.
Okay. I'll take it.
Anyway, thank you very much.
You are more than welcome.
Okay, well, so thank you very much, Alberto, for your talk. It was very interesting, and thanks everybody for watching. And so that's it for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you very much.